All right. Hi, everybody. So this debate is going to be a lot of fun. I come from a boxing background, so I have told them they're allowed to take the gloves off, but there's a couple rules. So as we know, Wall Street and DeFi have really gotten married in certain ways this year, and especially on a lot of projects around tokenization. Originally, fund tokenization was the holy grail, a liquid portfolio to liquid, but a lot of projects have come out since that are even more innovative. So, starting the debate, on my right side, Christopher Jensen, Director of Digital Asset Research at Franklin Templeton. He's going to take the bear case and fight against Anthony Scaramucci, founder and partner of Skybridge and Salt. And off we go. So, Christopher, why doesn't tokenization projects need a blockchain? I mean, why are you so negative?
Well, I'm negative against the stance that Wall Street doesn't need blockchain. So right, the way I see it is blockchain, it's not a replacement, but an augmentation that can help with...
Hold on a second, he brought notes.
Wasn't that the assignment?
You're like the Donald Trump of debating. I mean, you're not supposed to bring notes to these things. All right, go ahead, keep going. Go ahead.
As I was saying.
Go ahead, read your notes. Look at it. I got no notes here, okay? Just
Gloves
make sure.
off.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Jensen. Go ahead.
So the way I see it, right, is blockchain is a necessary tool to help level up the current system. I mean, we're all aware of Coinbase's great advertisements, upgrade the system. So, I'm arguing that blockchain isn't a replacement or a substitute for Wall Street, but it's a necessary ingredient for Wall Street to take that next level because it helps address some of its current inefficiencies. Ultimately, I think it helps reduce risk, and because of the underlying technology, it actually enables new use cases and new opportunities for innovation.
Okay, so I'm obviously the oldest person on the stage, so I'm channeling my Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler, two people that I absolutely can't stand. So for those of you that are for tokenization, forgive me. But the issue that Wall Street's going to have with everything that you just said is that it's totally unnecessary. We've already got a system in place. We have rails in place. We have a system that has withstood the test of time over 90 years since the SEC was developed. We have the deepest, most liquid capital markets now in the world, primarily because of U.S. leadership and regulation around the world in combination with the Fed. And so there would be absolutely no reason to change a system that is working so well. And one of the things that could potentially happen if you move to a tokenized system is how do you unwind trades in a tokenized system? Let's say that there was a trade error, or let's say I called my broker and said, the person made a mistake, or I got pricing execution wrong. How do you send things back over the blockchain if we tokenize everything?
Hold on. Do you have a response? Switching sides.
Do you want to respond to that or switch? Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's a good point. So the way I look at it, right, is that there are a few key parts of the value proposition, and they will segue right into that. So one is like, what do blockchains enable? And we get asked this question a lot at Franklin Templeton, right? I'm on the investment team, and a lot of times people are like, but what's it all for? What is the value of a blockchain? And one mental model that we use is it decreases the cost of trust. And how does it do that? You're able to remove intermediaries from the system. So, we have examples of this in our own business where we've removed an off-chain, transfer agent by putting it on-chain and realized savings upwards of, 30,000%, right? So that was our aha moment, which made us kind of double down on this. I think you're getting to the point, there's an immutable ledger underpinning all this. And yes, you might be able to settle and clear transactions faster, but how do you unwind something that gets encoded into an immutable ledger? And I think what we're seeing is experimentation being done in the space. So there are obviously private blockchains working to solve these problems. We've actually chosen to build on open permissionless chains, very important to us. And I think the permission, say DeFi activity or authenticating via KYC, AML, or even in the instance of you're settling your batch processing transactions off chain, you have an opportunity to unwind the trade, but then you can batch process settle down and it gets recorded onto the base layer. I don't think we have a silver bullet yet, but there's different iterations of this solution that give us encouragement.
Take your suit off for a second.
Respond to that or no?
Feel free to respond, and then I have a question.
Just quickly, so did anybody understand what he said? Let me channel Trump in the Biden debate. Do you think he understood what he said? Because I didn't understand what he said. And that's the problem with the situation, because the average person that you're trying to get into the investment world to buy stocks and bonds is already frightened enough. You just went through something that nobody would really understand. But if you said to somebody, let's say you were an FA somewhere, you said, okay, we're going to buy you stocks, we're going to use the DTC, we're going to put them in your account, you're going to have QSIP numbers, the system has worked for 90 plus years, and you don't have to worry about it. Moreover, because of the way the system is set up, we have something called the Securities Insurance Protection Corporation that's going to protect every one of these things. How is the Securities Insurance Protection Corporation going to protect transactions over the blockchain that may or may not be unwound?
Would you like to respond?
Yeah, look, obviously there's a lot of kind of cutting edge firms like leading the charge here, but even, kind of legacy institutions, the DTCC, is exploring ways that this technology can help, increase efficiencies in its business. And I think, yes, a lot of things do work. I come from a credit background, distressed debt, private credit, and, leveraged loans actually take 15 to 20 business days, so the better part of a month to settle. So we would buy and sell and be out of the trade, and the initial part of the transaction hasn't even settled yet. Right now there's airplanes whizzing around with physical checks. So I think a key part of this too is you don't have to solve everything at once. I think what we're seeing and what gives us encouragement is an iterative process, taking one piece of this system and upgrading that one piece rather than attempt a whole overfit at once.
So, take that suit off for a second. You're walking down the street.
Right.
And why does it matter, and who does it matter to, all these innovations of financial products using a blockchain?
Am I arguing the other side now, or no? Okay. All right, so I'm going to take the other side now. So I think it's an unbelievably great idea to tokenize everything, okay? And so let me explain why, okay? There are three major reasons why we want to tokenize everything. Number one, let's face it, we don't like and we don't trust each other. And so for the last 5,000 years, we've had third parties verifying transactions. But the problem in the securities industry, it's not one third party. It's actually 7 or 8 different parties. And so if you buy stock from my account, it's got to go through 7 different entities before it ends up in your account. When I joined the industry 35 years ago, it was trade day plus 5. I think we're now down to trade day plus 1, but there's a tremendous amount of friction in the situation. And so once we clarify or are able to unwind error trades, this system is actually a flawless and near perfect system, and hopefully the tokenization will happen on Solana. And I say that because I'm talking my book, because I own a lot of Solana, and I believe it will. I think it eventually will. And I will leave you with this thought about how important this is. There's $7 trillion spent globally on transaction verification and the credit card industry, wire transfers, et cetera. Just imagine if we can start tokenizing things and take third parties out of the equation, use the distributed network to trust each other, and take that $7 trillion and put it back into the economy. So I'm actually really for it, right. And I'm glad I'm now arguing for it, because I am actually really for it. But what I said before, if you don't mind me just saying this, what I said before against it is actually how the fossils, the 200-year-old people in Washington think about it. And it's incumbent upon everybody in this room to help the politicians get over the fossilization of the old world and move us into this new standard. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So continuing on tokenization.
You're against it now, you're You don't like? Go
I
ahead.
mean, continue to debate, and the other question I have for you as well is, in regards to tokenization, how much does on-chain transferability matter to the success of a tokenized fund and tokenized project?
I think it's, and I'm arguing with that or going along with that, right? I think it's incredibly important, not just to be able to transfer. I mean, this is part of the backbone of why we're all here, right? This new set of rails and this new system that we're talking about, if it's static, it actually does no good. It's imperative that it be able to move and move quickly. I think another key component is the ability to self-custody these assets. And so that gets trickier, right, as we're starting to blend the traditional finance system, with the more crypto-native system, and they come together, and assets from both worlds travel on the same set of rails. How do you self-custody those, which is, again, part of the ethos of crypto and why we're here. So I would say yes, very important to be able to transfer to self-custody. And then, we shouldn't just be trying to replicate existing systems on this new layer, this new infrastructure, but really use that technology to unlock and see what's possible with new use cases.
Would you like to respond?
I would. I want people to imagine a future where we've got these issues solved, and you own things on your phone that are completely tokenized, and you may end up owning things like your shares of Starbucks. They could be on your phone, and you could walk into the Starbucks and talk to the barista, and maybe Starbucks has a share repurchase program going on where they're buying back their shares, and they offer you a 20% discount on the coffee if you take your phone out and you tap their wallet with your wallet and you transfer your shares of Starbucks back to the company in exchange for the goods that they're providing. And it's just one example of where the future could be in terms of tokenizing things. And what I know from my life experience being on Wall Street is there are so many things in the market. Distressed debt is one of them, as Christopher mentioned, that is illiquid, it's unwieldy in terms of the way we handle this stuff. But in the world of tokenization, there's probably, and I did this estimate a few years ago, so forgive me, the information is a little bit dated, but there's probably 60% of our assets that are actually not liquid. The stock and bond market, generally liquid, ETFs are liquid, but our real estate, our art, our rental income properties, there's a whole list of things, probably 60% of the world is illiquid. But through tokenization, we can liquefy those markets. And if we can liquefy those markets, we can make them way more efficient. And if we can make them more efficient, we can make them more affordable for people. And so for me, this is where the opportunity is. If we want to have a fairer and freer global society, we have to spread the wealth. And one of the things that the blockchain does is it creates a much flatter, much freer, more libertarian society. So I'm for all of those things.
I appreciate that. As a follow-up, well, actually, everybody started clapping there.
Well, you can hit the gong. You can hit the gong.
It's actually very heavy. So as a follow-up on that, certain firms have been trying to do this and have done this for at least 4 years with whiskey, with wine. Now we're in the stage of different real-world assets and those tokenized funds. Why is it going to work this time? Why is it different?
Well, okay, so one of the big issues that we have is the regulatory blockages. And so every time we have the technology to create these things. I'm standing here, I hope to be at Solana Breakpoint 2025, where we have a Solana ETF. Okay, now everybody in this room says, well, that's probably not possible given where regulation is, but if you're an entrepreneur, you want to go from 0 to 1, and we have to tackle this at the regulatory side. And so all of these things that are not working, we can go back to regulatory blockages more than the technology itself. And I think, unfortunately, Leah, you had this experience with your Bitcoin Cash ETF. You were delayed capriciously and arbitrarily by the SEC as a result of the politicization of regulation. So one of the things that we have to do in our society is not make the regulation left-leaning or right-leaning, but how about right or wrong as opposed to left or right? And if we do that, these things are ready for prime time and we can create this liquidity.
Fantastic. And response?
In addition to the regulatory point, which can't stress enough, I don't know if I'm supposed to agree with you, but I do obviously, is the, just because you tokenize something doesn't entail liquidity. And so I think what we're seeing is some great proof of concepts being run and different types of, kind of one-off assets being tokenized, brought onto these new sets of rails. But, whenever we look at a tokenization use case, there's the technology piece. That's becoming easier, right? And then there's, if you're going to do it in a regulatory compliant way, maybe that's sometimes more challenging depending on what market you're in, what jurisdiction you're trying to navigate. But the third piece is just as important as these two, and it's, and we see this in DeFi, right? Like there's a great innovation, but if that's not connected to the rest of the ecosystem, the flywheel doesn't start. And so we see this at the convergence of tokenization as well. Just because you bring an asset on chain doesn't necessarily mean the liquidity is there for it. So integrating it into the rest of the system, opening up new demand, use cases for it, enhancing its utility, I think these are just as important to get the flywheel effect going.
Absolutely. And a follow-up to that, you did speak about jurisdictions. What differences do you see from what we've seen with the SEC in the United States to we're sitting in Singapore right now? The Asian climate is obviously very different, in Singapore specifically. What are you seeing?
Yeah, and so that actually relates back to our, I guess, proposition that we're debating, right? Does Wall Street need crypto? And if we think about the Wall Street that you and I both worked on, actually in New York in the United States, Wall Street absolutely needs crypto because without crypto, it's going to become less competitive on the global stage. And so, we're definitely taking inspiration from what's happening here in Singapore, in Europe. I just came from a week in the Middle East, which was extremely constructive, hearing how they were thinking about things. A gentleman from Japan was just talking to me last night about, the latest advancements in their thinking and acceptance and adoption of this asset class. So I think, all of these hubs and cities and regulatory jurisdictions are keeping each other on their toes, and those that aren't open-minded will really fall behind from a competitive standpoint.
I agree, and I've seen you in Korea. I've seen you in many different countries. So, what's your take?
Well, I know we just have a couple of minutes left. So, what I want to say, I think one of the exercises that is super important is to take the other side of the argument. So, we're here at Solana Breakpoint. So, most of us, if not all of us, are bulls. I don't think there's too many people in this audience that short Solana, but you have to understand the other side of the arguments in markets. You have to understand the other side of the arguments as it relates to a regulator, and I think it's very, very important to do that. If you do, you'll make your arguments more compelling. You'll be able to maneuver in a way that's more progressive for all of us and advancing the technology. And I think, unfortunately, this space, whether it's crypto in general, Solana specifically, or Bitcoin, there is a generation of people that are still in power, specifically in the United States, that don't understand it, and so therefore, as a result of not understanding it, they don't like it. And so I would just suggest to people, don't be dismissive of those people. Go out and talk to those people and try to allay their fears by first understanding them.
Christopher, final thoughts?
Just to second that, again, we're supposed to be opposing each other, but, and I guess to underscore, right, as we're traveling around, we do hear a lot of different perspectives. And as we know, this industry and this asset class evolves so quickly. So people who used to think they had a finger on the pulse, that pulse might be from 18 months ago, which as we know in crypto time, that's ages ago. So I think, it's important to understand the other side, be open-minded. Someone might think they're totally up to speed on the latest innovations, both on the technology side and on the regulatory side. But really try to discuss it in a non-combative tribal way, even though we're all big Solana fans.
Well, gentlemen, shake hands.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Real pleasure to be here. Thank you. You're the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great job.
Fucking